Today on Trucks, Project Crazy Horse is kicking in the barn as Stacey's bolting on a new front axle, spring, shocks, wheels, and tires. And that old straight six, it's headed straight to the glue factory. Then we'll take a look at the newest supercharged pickup on the block, the Nissan Frontier. Tell them about it, Stacey.
There's only one place to learn how to build stuff like this: trucks. Welcome to Trucks and our growing pile of junk. Now, a few weeks ago, we started a buildup on an old, beat-up, dilapidated old Ford Bronco to see if we could resurrect it from an old, rusty piece of junk. And in the meantime, show you some how-to that you can use on your project, whether it's a Bronco or not. So the first thing we did is put in new floor pans. Then last week, raised the body up off the chassis, then put in a new rear suspension. Now we got new springs, 3.5-inch lift, a dual shock system, and of course a new 9-inch Ford rear end. Then we ran out of time. So this week we're going to finish up the front suspension, but not just that. We're going to take this old engine and tranny out of here, deal with some steering issues. So strap on your tool belt because we are going to finish laying out the chassis of Project Crazy Horse. All right, the suspension front and rear is from James Duff Enterprises. And like I said before, we got a 3.5-inch lift on the rear. We're going to do the same thing on the front. Now, as you can see, we've already got these new extended radius arms in. We did that last week. So now it's time to put in this new axle. Now, just in case you've forgotten, this is a Dana 44 from Curry Enterprises. 456 gears, just like the rear. The arms and the brakes are all from James Duff. The best part is, this will slide right into place like a stock axle. Now we're using these new polyurethane bushings because that gives us the right caster, and also it will last a lot longer and work a lot better than these stock rubber ones. Just make sure you use some grease on these or they're going to squeak on you. One of the few original pieces that we have to reuse are these old caps. Now these actually bolt to the front of the radius arm and they hold your axle in. So if you'll hit them with a wire brush and a coat of paint, check this out. They will look like brand new. Now, I know you're going to be tempted to reuse all this old mounting hardware. No, don't do it. They actually hold your axle in. It costs you about 10 bucks to replace them, and that is not where to get cheap. Now we're ready for the new coil spring. Now you're going to love this. Notice there is a huge difference between this new spring and this old stocker. Now they were trying to do something with these spacers, but we'll go ahead and just roll that away to the trash heap. Now, a couple of original pieces that you are going to have to reuse is the lower spring cup and the lock. So go ahead and set those in place. Then rotate the spring into the lock. And then just seat the spring into the pocket up here on the top. Then it's held in place with this little clip. Man, it's nice when they fit like this. Next, we're going to bolt on these dual shocks. Now they run all the way from the shock hoop down here to the radius arm. Now you have a couple choices here. You can mount 2 shocks behind the spring like we've done, so give you a little softer ride, a little more axle flex, or you can mount 1 shock behind the spring and 1 out here in front. That'll give you a little firmer ride. Now if you do it that way, you're going to need to take this tab that comes with the kit and weld it down here on the cap. Just make sure you take the cap off because you don't want to melt that urethane. With the new shocks in place, it is time for the drop bracket for the track bar. Now you have to use one of these if you're using a 3.5-inch lift because that is what's going to center that axle when you're all done. Now it just slides onto the stock bracket, tap it into place, then just bolt it on. Now I strongly recommend that you run a weld around that just like you did the shock hoops, give you some extra strength. Now we come to the last part of the original suspension that you're going to have to reuse, and that is the track bar. Now we went ahead and cleaned it up, painted it, put in new urethane bushings, and heck, this thing's ready to go in. Now, for those of you that don't know, anytime that you have a coilover suspension and a solid axle, well, you need some sort of track bar to keep that axle from moving side to side. Now, what happens over time is that these bushings will wear out or the hole will get sloppy, and that will allow the axle to move just a little bit. That causes the vehicle to dart to one side or the other. Of course, what do? You go to correct it, and now you're wandering all over the road. So, having new bushings in your track bar is very important. Okay, we're going to follow that up with the wheels and tires. Ta-da! Now, you may remember from last week that we put Parnelli Jones and Mickey Thompson on the same team. Now, we did that by using Mickey Thompson Challenger wheels because they look so cool and they're very strong. And we wrap those with the Parnelli Jones Dirt Grip tires. And these have a very aggressive tread for mud and rocks and stuff like that. They'll also do us well on the highway. Now, why don't you step back and take a look and kind of digest on what we've done. Looks pretty good, doesn't it? All except for that old engine. I'm going to do something with that, but after the break.
Next, it's hasta la vista, old steering box and tired motor, then hello, new motor mounts.
Right here. All you do is measure back 9 inches from the cross member and weld them in. Welcome back to trucks. The last time I pushed this thing in, well, it was a major piece of junk. Now it's starting to really look like something. All right, now that we've got a new suspension underneath this chassis, front and rear, we're going to deal with an area that's almost always bad on an old four-wheel drive, and that's the steering. Now, I'm not even going to attempt to rebuild this old steering box for a few reasons. First, it's a manual unit. Second of all, this old stub shaft is completely stripped and it's got a hole drilled in it. And check out that slop. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and unbolt it from the frame and retire that for good. Oh, strike. Now, for our new steering system, we went back to James Duff Enterprises, got one of their new power steering boxes. Now, this is a must if you are running 35-inch or bigger tires. Now, to go with that, we also got their dropped pitman arm, the drag link, and of course the tie rod to hold everything together. To install the new box, all you do is set it into the stock location here and bolt it in. I wish it was all that easy. Now, a little tip here for you. Behind the box is real susceptible to rust on the frame. So it's a good idea to take a little paint and paint it back there. Now, obviously, I'm not going to do that because I'm going to sandblast and paint this frame when we're all done. Now, once you have your box in place, go ahead and put on your pitman arm, drag link, and tie rod, and you are done with the steering. Okay, now that we've got the suspension taken care of, it is time to say goodbye to this old 6-cylinder, 3-speed, and transfer case combination. Now, before you come in here and just start ripping things apart, you need to take some time and remove the parts you might reuse and set them aside, like this old clutch linkage. Then you can start tearing things apart. Now, once you got it all disconnected, unbolt the engine and the transmission from the mounts and lift that sucker out of there. Now, anytime you start changing engines, well, that usually means that your motor mounts are going to need to be changed, and our old Bronco is no exception. These mounts for the old 6-cylinder are in completely the wrong place for the big old V8 we're going to stick in here. So, they've got to come off. Out comes the plasma cutter. We'll follow that up with a grinder to dress up this frame rail to get it nice and smooth for our new mounts. Now, it is very important that those new mounts fit nice and flush against that frame, so do whatever grinding and trimming that you have to get it right. All right, for our new motor mounts for our V8, we went to James Duff Enterprises and got these motor mounts, and they fit right here. All you do is measure back 9 inches from the cross member and weld them in. Now, these take away all of the guesswork, all the measurements that go with converting to a V8. Matter of fact, when you get ready to put that new motor in, boom, it should fit like a glove. Now, I know it's time to take a break, but after the break, I'm going to show you what else we're going to do to this frame. You're not going to want to miss that.
Next, Crazy Horse gets its cow catchers before some new metals fixing up the body. And later, Stacey's got some cool new reading material in truck gear. Just can't get enough of trucks? Check us out online at truckstv.com.
Welcome back to the shop. Man, what a show so far. Now we've got new axles and suspension in Project Crazy Horse, big old tires. We upgraded the steering, then welded in motor mounts for a new small block Ford V8. Now, you may be thinking, well, shoot, that pretty much takes care of the chassis. What else is there? Well, there's a little bit to do to the frame, and it's right up here in front. Now, remember how these old frame rails were all boogered up? Somebody welded this junk on there. So I went ahead and cut it off and ground it down to where they're like stock again. Now this is very important because the bumpers that I'm going to use are going to bolt right to the stock frame rail. Now, I know at the mention of bumpers that your eyes probably lit up and you're thinking, bumpers? What kind of bumpers are you going to use? Well, they're right over here. Let's go check them out. Now, there's a lot of different styles of bumper out there for the Bronco, but one of the coolest are the pre-runner styles like this from James Duff. Now the features of these is they have the tubular design, so it's lighter weight, but they're still very strong. Now this particular bumper for the front has mounting points for off-road lights and of course a winch. You gotta have a winch. And the rear bumper already has a receiver hitch built right in. Okay, to mount the bumper to the frame, if you were just to bolt it on here, well, you would bend this part of the frame because it's not boxed in here. It's not that strong. That is what these inserts are for. They slide into the frame, give you a fully boxed end that you just mount the bumper to. That is very strong. All right, that takes care of the chassis. Now the only thing we have left to do, now that all the grinding and fitting and welding is done, is take it all back apart, sandblast the chassis, and paint it. But all the hard work is done. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, man, that's a pretty happening chassis, but what about this old body? At least from the firewall forward, this thing is pretty rough. So what are we going to do? Well, I made one call to Jeff's Bronco graveyard. Let me show you what I got. Now, see how these panels are all rusty and beat up here? Well, check this out. Brand new replacement panels. Now you say you got some damage or some rust in the wheel wells. Look at this, just like the factory. Now how about the core support, the area that supports the front of the truck and the radiator? You're gonna love this. It doesn't get any better than that. And how about exterior pieces like the grill? They're always beat up. Well, how about a new grill and all the trim pieces and the lights? Now, you're probably thinking that I have a ton of body work to do to beat those old fenders back into shape. And if I was going to reuse them, that's exactly what I'd have to do. But heck, for about 150 bucks, you can get brand new all steel fenders. Now check these out. They are stamped just like the originals, and they fit perfect. That is one of the good things about a Bronco. Almost every piece that came on that truck originally, well, it's available at places like Jeff's Bronco Graveyard. That just goes to show you that old Broncos don't really die. They just keep going and going and going, but we can't do that. We got to take a break. We'll see you right after this.
After the break, it's the newest Frontier from Nissan, and this one's got a blower. Stay tuned. And now truck gear, parts, tools, and equipment for pickups and sport utilities.
You know, one thing that never ceases to amaze me is how some guys can spend a ton of money on chrome and polished accessories, like these valve covers, and then skimp on the really important stuff like quality motor oil. Now, it doesn't matter what your application is, Valvoline has got you covered with everything from their conventional, state-of-the-art, all climate 2050 all the way up to a full synthetic. Now these keep your engine clean on the inside where of course it's most important. Matter of fact, if the guy that I bought this engine from had kept some fresh Valvoline in it, well, it'd probably still be running down the road instead of sitting here on the engine stand. And once they quit running, well, even those fancy valve covers don't look so good. That is cheap insurance. Have you ever spent much time in a bookstore? What's the first thing you do? You head back to the automotive section, see what's back there. Now you probably have noticed that there's a lot of books on Camaros and Mustangs and things like that, but there's not a lot on trucks. Well, Stoger Publishing Company is changing that with books like Great Trucks and 4x4 vehicles. Now the Great Trucks book is about big trucks, 18-wheelers and foreign trucks and military stuff. Check that out. Now, the 4x4 vehicles book, of course, deals with 4x4s, like the early Jeeps, like that M38A1. You got British stuff, overseas stuff. It's kind of cool to see what they're doing overseas. Check out this Forest Rover. Man, that's cool. I wish I had one of those. Now, these books sell for 15 bucks a piece. You can get them at a quality bookstore. You know, the last few weeks we have been showing you a lot of Bronco stuff and the very unique history that goes with these vehicles. But a lot of you may not realize that these were actually available in 3 different configurations. The first and the most common was the fully removable hardtop. The second, like the one we've got here, was the factory half cab. And they did away with that in '73. Then, of course, there was the Roadster. Made that from '66 to '69, and finding one of those is like finding gold. Now, the good news is you can take any Bronco and turn it into the Roadster with these Sport Roadster door kits from Tom's Bronco Parts. Now, these feature the fiberglass door insert, just like the originals. You've got all the metal inner structure, just like the originals. And the best part is, these slide right in place of a stock door and give you a doorless Roadster, which is great when you're out on the trail. Now this whole kit sells for about 388 bucks. Tom's Bronco Parts is who's got it. In the automotive world, there's always a lot of changes going on. Somebody's coming out with this, somebody's discontinuing that, and nowhere has there been more changes in the last few years than in the world of trucks. So it's a little hard for people to really stand up and take notice, but it's exactly what they did when they heard that Nissan was coming out with their V6 supercharged Frontier pickup. So we're going to take a look at one with you. The first thing that really separates the Frontier from the rest of the truck crowd is the exterior styling. Big, rugged fender flares and a chiseled, angular front end lend a rough and tumble RoboCop style attitude that really looks good on a small truck. Of course, the skid plates and side tubes not only add protection, they also add to the style and the overall look of an already tough-looking truck. Up on top, you've got a tubular roof rack that's not only functional and will carry your gear, but it fits right in with the styling of the body. Now, if that's not enough to haul your junk, well, this is the Frontier Crew Cab Long Bed. It's got the longest bed of any 4-door compact truck, so hauling big loads is no problem. Now, speaking of those 4 doors, the rear opens up into nice padded seats and room for 2 adults. Now, granted, if you're over 6 feet tall, maybe a little tight, so you might want to try to reserve a seat in the front. Check this out. You got high back bucket seats, and they sit you right in front of a nicely styled dash and gauge cluster, while the steering wheel houses a standard airbag and cruise controls. The climate controls are mounted right in the center, and they flow down into a nice stereo, which terminates into a console housing your shifters. Now, this is great. Nissan gets a big thumbs up for using an actual shifter to positively engage the transfer case into 4-wheel drive, instead of one of those dang push-button things that always goes out on you. Now we get to the area that really makes the Frontier different. That's the 3.3-liter supercharged V6. It kicks out 210 horsepower and 246 foot-pounds of torque. Now that definitely gives the truck some pep and power and makes it a respectable performer, but honestly it's not quite as much performance as we expected. Alright, up front, the 4-wheel drive is housed in an independent front suspension, and our truck had the automatic overdrive transmission and the limited slip rear end, which obviously doesn't make this a hardcore off-road vehicle, but it is capable of handling most real-world situations. Well, that wraps up our look at the 2002 Nissan Frontier pickup. And for what it is, well, we'd have to rate it right at the top in its class. Now, if you compare it to a full-size truck or the other supercharged truck, the Lightning, well, that's not what this truck is. Now, if you think something like this will fulfill your needs, well, you can have it, really, for around $23,000.
Next week on Trucks, Stacey's gonna make a 350 out of a 302 as he shows you all the right parts you need for one awesome engine build-up. Then we'll go for a spin in the wild Dodge concept vehicle, the Ramrod. And finally, we'll relax in the very comfortable Lincoln Blackwood. That's all next week on Trucks. For a VHS copy of today's show, call toll-free 1-877-853-7260. Show videos are just $12.95 plus shipping and handling. Trucks is an RTM production.